Hey, hello, everybody. People are joining. Seeing so many people joining very, very quickly. So I'm going to give us all a minute to get settled. Thank you all today for joining this webinar on this incredibly important topic. We're going to do some briefing on settler violence in the West Bank, what's been going on. We have incredible guests today. Some whom live on the ground, some of whom go to the ground, and all of whom care deeply about keeping these communities safe and preventing and stopping this kind of horrific violence that we've seen over the last number of weeks and months, and really many, many years. So as the numbers continue to rise, I'm going to introduce myself. My name is Elisheva Goldberg. Thank you all for joining us. Thank you to our guests. Thank you to everyone who's here. I'm the Deputy Vice President for Communications and Policy at the New Israel Fund. And I'm really, really glad to be moderating this amazing panel of speakers today. I'm going to do a tiny bit more blah, blah welcoming of everybody so that we can all be here together because the numbers keep rising. And we have a lot of registrants for this event today because it's a very, very, very important and pressing topic that we are all interested in learning about and need to learn about and need to understand what our role is with our amazing panelists. So thank you for joining us. It's great to see everybody. Again, my name is Elisheva Goldberg, the Deputy VP for Communications and Policy at NIF. And I'm just going to sort of get started with a little bit of an intro and give people a little bit of time to join in. So, you know, it's been a really, really tough time on the ground in the West Bank over the last few weeks. And it really has been many, many years of violence and sort of, you know, a lot of settler violence over the last number of years. But in the weeks since the ceasefire in Gaza took effect, there's been a really frightening surge in settler violence targeting Palestinian communities across the West Bank. Since October 7th, there was another surge. And so, you know, we're sort of seeing these things come in what feels like waves. But it's very, very scary, and entire families are living under threat every day in their homes, in their fields, and their very lives are at risk. And this is not, you know, as I said, a new trend, and it's certainly one that we at the New Israel Fund have been following for the past decade plus. And our grantees, who you will hear from, have been documenting this phenomenon, both home demolitions, expulsions from property and land, expropriation, and we have also invested in protecting activists who go and stand with people who are in the most danger. But the current sort of explosion of violence seems a little bit different, perhaps a little bit more brazen, more intense. The UN said that this last year has been the worst year for settler violence since they began tracking in 2006. And because so many of us have been focused on what's happening in Gaza or what happened in Gaza over the last 2 years, some of us missed some of the more dramatic shifts that have been happening on the ground in the West Bank. And so this webinar is bringing us together today to try and understand what is really going on, what people are doing, what activists are doing, and what Palestinians themselves are doing, and how we as a community can support their resilience and push back against this phenomenon. So, you know, obviously here at the New Israel Fund, and we're so glad that all of you are joining us today. I see hundreds of people joining this conversation. We very, very deeply believe that every person deserves safety, dignity, and freedom. And our grantees and partners are doing everything that they can to stand up to the attacks that settlers are heaping upon the Palestinians in the West Bank. They're documenting them, supporting the affected families, and insisting on accountability wherever possible. And more than that, they're insisting on hope. They're insisting that this is possible, that we can stand in solidarity, that we can do this together. And so today we are joined by these three incredible people who represent the kind of courage and moral clarity that we see as necessary for this work. So I'm going to introduce them. And then the way we're going to do this is that each one of them is going to have a few minutes to speak about their work. And then I'll ask a few questions, and we'll answer some questions from the audience after that. And my hope is that we can be in conversation, the four of us, and move this conversation to a place of hope and of trust and honesty. So Eid Hathaleen is an old friend of mine. I've known Eid since 2012, although I'm not sure, Eid, you remember me from 2012. I was fairly young. But I've been to al-Khair, which is his village, many, many times. Eid is a self-taught artist and an anti-occupation activist. His village, al-Khair, is currently under threat of various demolitions. And it has been for many years in different ways. The village is located in the South Hebron Hills, which is a relatively rural area. al-Khair is next to the settlement of Carmel, and he'll talk about that as we have this conversation. His family has faced home demolitions and relentless pressure from the settlers next door over the course of many years. And despite this, Eid continues to create art and advocate for peace and justice. Thank you so much for joining us. Ziv Stahl is the executive director of Yesh Din, an AF grantee, an Israeli human rights organization that documents human rights violations in the West Bank, and works very, very hard to hold the perpetrators to account. She has led years of research on law enforcement and the systemic failure to prosecute settler violence. Our third panelist is Rabbi Avi Dabush, who is the executive director of Rabbis for Human Rights, which is an interdenominational organization rooted in the Jewish belief that every person is created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim. And he has been involved for a very long time in social justice movements in Israel and is truly a leading voice for equality and an end to the occupation. Some of you may recognize Avi and Ziv from previous webinars or events. And I want to just note that these two people are also survivors of October 7th in their own homes. They lived through this attack personally 2 years ago. And so having them here today really to speak about attacks on Palestinians as human rights activists is a testament to their courage and moral backbone and resilience. And of course, Eid, nothing, including my statement right now, can attest to your courage and resilience, especially in the wake of the murder of your dear friend and relative, Aude, who was also an incredibly dear friend of mine, Eid Hathaleen, who was murdered in al-Khair not too long ago by a violent settler who had a gun. And we'll discuss this later. So thank you all so much for your courage and for your resilience and for being here. So with that, I'll turn to you, Eid. So you're joining us from your village in al-Khair, and it's a village that, as we've said, I know well, and has welcomed so many Jewish and international activists over the years. Can you share with us what life is like right now for you and your community, especially in light of the recent building of an outpost and the demolition orders, and what it means for you to live under this threat as yourself?
Yeah, thank you, dear Elisheva, for this opportunity and this event with my friends I know. And it's good to share with you what we have here on the ground, basically, which we face day and night, always, since October 7th and before. But in the last 2 weeks, basically, we have the most terrible violence by settlers and by the military in the same. Means they came and they built these caravans in the night. After they killed Ode, and immediately they began digging and constructed nearby the community center, nearby the window, and they put this outpost in the middle of the village. Means restricted our movement, our families, our way in between both sides of the village, and our way to the school. Every day we need to escort these children to the school. The most terrible thing, they keep following us. Even when we get a decision by the court in Jerusalem, means these caravans is illegal and they should move them away, and they not allowed to live in there. So what does that do? They bring two families in the midnight and they put them in the caravans, and they put them like they are living before the decision. But every evidence show that they just bring them while the decisions, taken yesterday, and they know about that. And since then, they keep staying there. living there, and they made a path also in the private land, and they keep walking there. The most bad thing happened. One of the Israeli Knesset members, he called Sisukot, he visited the caravans. And we met him face to face nearby the community center. And he began, shouting to us, began saying, you are all Hamas, you all pro-Hamas, you all terrorists, you all Arabs, blah, blah, blah. And he said, in a threatening way, I will evict you out of here. He said that. Okay, then he went out because maybe he do it for his social media, followers. 2 days later, we just surprised by the IDF combined with the civil administration team, and they began sticking these papers on the community center gate and the other house nearby. And then they moved to the greenhouse. Then they moved to the other side of the village and they stick there. And that day they put 14 demolition orders, final demolition orders. That's mean the most thing we need in these circumstances. And instead of evicting the law against settlers, they put these demolition orders on the houses of al-Khair. And, you know what's mean demolition orders. You know what's mean demolition homes. And my friends know that. The people who, Israeli activists on the field and the people who, saw this experience of home demolition on the ground, they know what's that mean. It's mean a lot of things. Mean trauma, shock, people being homeless without shelter, means families with children, adult babies, everybody will be homeless. That's the meaning of home demolition. We have 14 days to appeal since they put them in the 28th of October. The appeal end today. It's end today. The period of time they put this end of today, but yesterday we got more 14 days to appeal with Tzvi Avni, the lawyer from St. Eve, which very good step, basically. And the more important thing, that the legal side worked very well. And the lawyer said, okay, guys, we work on the legal side, but the most important thing, we need more political intervention, political pressure on Israel. Means we need to involve the Congress, we need to involve the State Department, we need to involve the European Parliament, and we need to involve these countries who have very good relationship with Israel, and they have, partnership and allies. And they should, they should just talk to the Israeli ambassadors around in their countries and also send them messages. That's the idea of intervention. And I know my friends, they just do a lot of work. I so appreciate it for the whole work done by the friends around the world. And they get it to the senators, they get it to the Congress, and all these, senators, they signed this letter and sent it to Netanyahu. I hope it will do something. I am sure these 14 days more, it's because of the pressure. I am sure it's not because of anything else. And that's the meaning of how we keep advocating, how we keep talking about the story of al-Khair, the story of this place who's very peaceful activist killed in a brutal way. And he's very peaceful activist. He's not a member of any terrorist groups. We condemn terrorism all over before even it's come and happened. And our opinion is very clear about October 7th. We say it before and we say it every time. These things shouldn't happen between both of us in this country. Jewish and Arabs, we should live in peace. And every day, me and Israeli activists, we stand in front of the settlers. Every day it's happened. And they sleep here in our homes. This is the reality that the Israeli government hated. And nowadays, they follow the Israeli activists more than Palestinians. Can you imagine that? Today, they stopped the activists in my home, al-Khair. They detained the Israeli activists for 1 hour. Why? Because they came and they would stand with me in front of the settlers who came to, do provocation and began harassing our, agriculture field. The problem, and also last week, just 3 days ago, they declared the community center area as a closed military zone. Why? They didn't want these activists to come to the playground, to the community center to get more information and stay there. They
I'm going to
declared,
explain. I'm just going to explain what a closed military zone is. Just briefly, a closed military zone is when the army declares a particular area for really any arbitrary reason that they decide, a place where people can't go. So you just can't go there. So they didn't want the activists in the community center, so they declared it a closed military zone. That's what you're saying, right? Yeah.
yes, because listen, they try to affect the activists anyway from al-Khair and Susia and the Twane and all Masafir Yatta
This is the
and
areas
South
in the
Hebron
South
Hills.
Hebron Hills.
But yeah, and in general, I mean, they deported 2 American activists, Jewish activists, just last week from Rabbis. Friend of us, we know them. And then they tried to deport some activists in the beginning of the war from South Hebron. They deported 4 people in the beginning of the war, and they tried to affect Israelis by this. They give them a sign order for 2 months. He's not allowed to come to South Hebron Hills. This is
Right.
for Israeli citizens. They do it. The main goal is very clear. They want to clear the field for settlers to do their work without any body standing in front of their face. Mainly today the weapon and the elements we use, standing with activists standing with us in the field, both side by side, and we've been beaten together, Israelis and Palestinians, by settlers. And the army also, I saw the behavior from the IDF against the activists today. Very brutal, same like Palestinians. And they are Israelis.
Yeah.
They are Jewish. But the army behaved to him very bad, really, and this is very sad.
Yeah.
The atmosphere is not that much good with this government against the activists, if they are Israelis, Palestinians, or internationals.
Yeah, Ed, I'm gonna move to another panelist. This is incredible to hear from you and to understand your perspective on the ground. I mean, one of the people who was attacked, similar to the ways that the army and settlers used to attack Palestinians, and now they attack everybody, was Eli Daya's father, Odedi Daya. Eli is a staffer for the New Israel Fund in Israel. And her father was brutally beaten. I mean, there are photos of him totally bloodied by settler violence. Yes, in Beta. So I'm gonna, this is the violence is really widespread, and I'm gonna turn us to Ziv. Ziv, you've studied these trends really for years, and Yesh Din has done so much research, and you have so much perspective on the sort of systematic and systemic challenges of settler violence. And I want to ask you how you see it sort of fitting in to a pattern, a policy, the general, aspects of the politics of Israel right now, and what's really driving this at the end of the day.
So I think we've seen settler violence for many, many years, almost since the beginning of the settlement enterprise. But we do ask ourselves, why do we see such a spike in settler violence in the recent 2 to 3 years? And I think it's a good point to start would be just before the war, when this government started its term, the Israeli government. And they declared right from the beginning that their aim and their goal is to establish Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank. And they did a lot to achieve that. And I think what we see on the ground right now is we call it like a tweezer kind of movement. So we have on one hand what's going on in the Knesset and in the government, and basically a shift and a change in the way Israel controls the West Bank legally. So there has been a lot of changes. Maybe I'll say a little bit more about that in a minute. And then we have what's going on the ground, and the practical or de facto arm of the government is the settler violence, and it's very, very effective. I think one of the points of settler violence, beyond, of course, racism and what we know that is typical for hate crimes, I don't see settler violence as a pure or a typical hate crime, because hate crime is a crime just because of the hate. But here there's a strong, very, as you said, systemic and systematic political motive backed by the government and the state. And this is meant and designed to push Palestinians away from the places they're in, from the agricultural land, but also from the places many communities live and from the villages. And we've seen also a shift very recently, I think more so, of the settler violence from the fields, from the olive groves to the villages. So many of the attacks are now in the villages, trying to push away the communities and scare them. And this is a dramatic shift.
Can I just ask you, when you say in the
Sure.
villages, give us a picture of what you mean, because we know what the olive harvest attacks look like, but what do you mean in the villages?
I think we already have an image of that also, because we've seen Hawara and we've seen other attacks where you have just pogroms of tens and sometimes hundreds of settlers raiding on a village. First of all, attacking homes and throwing stones and attacking who's ever on their way, and also harming and basically tearing apart cars and some agricultural, let's say, chicken coop or many structures in the village. Sometimes they would leave some kind of a note, a graffiti on the wall. But we had more and more, and of course, torches. I should have started with that. They torch everything, so homes, cars, whatever. We've documented an increase in these kind of events or incidents. And I think a very good point to think about is the fact that both in the villages and in the fields, we see more and more soldiers that come with the attackers, and they either do nothing to stop them, or sometimes they even participate in the attacks. We have many settlers who are now enlisted to reserve military service because of the war. So many of the attackers are actually now in uniform or in some kind of capacity part of the army, even though the army sometimes denies that this is part of its activities. Which leads to another problem, and that is that there is no authority who is willing to investigate those kind of incidents, because it's not the military police and it's not the police. So this is just like a side note. But I think what we've seen next to the settler violence, or accompanies the settler violence, is a lot of other violence that is also inflicted by the state. So we have the home demolitions that Eid was talking about, but we also have a lot of growth and development in the settlement themselves, something that is, of course, not equal. So Palestinians cannot plan and cannot get housing permits. But for Israel, it's much more easy. Also, a big encouragement by the state for a new phenomena we call the farming outposts, which is a new few years type of illegal settlements, outposts, that contain very little population, unlike other maybe more established outposts, but still inflict a lot of violence to the entire area. And basically they declare this is their point. Their point is to safeguard state land and push away Palestinians from the land and make sure that everyone knows that they're here now and they're here to stay. And this is all back.
When you say they don't need a lot of population, it's like it can be one family, it can be a couple of guys.
It's usually one family, some maybe very few volunteers, but they do have herds of sheep and goats, and they use that to take over the land. They also get permits to herd the stock from the country, from Israel. They also get allocations of infrastructures and sometimes even security measures. And of course, they are protected by the military, like every settlement in the West Bank. And this has changed the face of the West Bank completely. So if any of you have been to the West Bank, I don't know, even 7 years ago or 5 years ago, it doesn't look the same now, and it doesn't feel the same now. And it's a much more dangerous place, I would say, of course, for activists. And we've seen the results of only this weekend was a very bloody weekend for activists, Palestinians and Israelis. Yeah. But we've seen that in growth for a long period of time. I think that if we're talking about the political aspect of it, so the point is, of course, to annex the West Bank. But whoever wishes to annex the West Bank, and I'm talking about this government, they don't want to annex the people, they just want the land. And the point is to push away the Palestinians from the land that they are plotting or aiming or aspiring to annex and implement full Israeli sovereignty over. And we've seen that with the Smotrich plan that he presented just a month ago, I think it was even 2 months ago, where we've seen a plan of where Israel should apply its sovereignty, and basically it was the entire territory besides the big cities, so all of area B and C. Area B, just so people know, includes all the villages in the West Bank.
Yeah, I just want to name that Eid lives in a village in Area C, and that would be included in that plan to annex. Of course.
So Area C, I think everyone knows this government aspires to apply sovereignty on, but the news in Smotrich's plan was that it included Area B as well, which is most of the villages and most of the population that is not living in the cities, in the big cities such as Ramallah and Kilkilia and Tulkarem, and Nablus and everywhere. So I think what we've seen now with the recent month is first of all, the announcement of Trump that there will be no sovereignty. I think people take it much more serious than they should, because this is a declarative annexation. When we're talking about, I don't know, passing a bill or announcing in the Knesset that Israel applies its sovereignty, but what's going on the ground doesn't need the declaration, right? So on the ground, things are shifting and turning to a point where I'm not sure it's reversible, or coming to a point where it will be very, very hard to overturn, even if the government changes after the elections. And talking about the elections, maybe it's another point that we should talk about, because we feel that Smotrich, Ben-Gvir, Struk, even Netanyahu, feels the window closing. So we are entering an election year in Israel. We don't know when the elections will be. It might be at the end of the year, a year from now, but it might be sooner. Some people talk about the summer. So they want to, grab as much as they can. And this is what we've seen in recent months, just like a run to get and grab as much as they can. And when I'm talking about as much as they can, it's land. It's attracting Israeli people to come and live in the West Bank because they want to double the number of settlers to 1 million from 500,000, which is kind of now. And we've seen how they talk. Struk is calling this period period of miracles.
Orit Struk is a member of Smotrich's religious Zionist party and a radical sort of thinker and settler.
He's a minister.
And a minister.
And a minister.
And a minister and a lot of authority of what's going on in the West Bank. Maybe just, if I have a little bit more time to say something
1
about
minute.
the legal.
But we'll come back to you.
So I'll just say maybe just a quick word that Smotrich, in his less known job or role as the minister in charge of the West Bank, basically, really have done and completed a full revolution in the terms of how Israel controls the West Bank. So it's very hard to talk now about military occupation, which was the legal framework that was applied to the West Bank because of international law, with appliance to the international law. And now the creation of Smotrich, the settlement division within his office, is basically running the West Bank and deciding everything that affects the lives of both Israelis and Palestinians in the West Bank.
Yeah, I'm just going to break that down one step further, Ziv, so that our audience totally understands, and then Avi will move to you. Smotrich is the finance minister, but he's also a minister in the defense ministry. And in that capacity, he is, like you say, like running the West Bank. And remember, he is not a military officer. He is not a military occupier. He's a civilian. And so I think what you're saying is that the revolution that he's accomplished is to move the authority from a military authority into a civilian authority, which is a very different situation. Right?
Exactly. So we have civilians who are now in charge of everything that's going on in the West Bank, and they consider they're public servants, right? So their interests, what they consider is what they consider the Israeli public interests, not Palestinians. They don't consider any protection of Palestinians, protection of Palestinian property, and so on.
Right.
Which is illegal by international law.
Right.
Just to say.
Rabbi Avi Dabush, I'm going to turn to you now. So I want to ask you, Rabbis for Human Rights has been on the ground so much in the last number of weeks and months because of the olive harvest. I mean, this organization is incredible, and you've always been, you're always activists. That's who you're marshaling. You're marshaling Rabbis for Human Rights. That includes North American rabbis. But I want to say, you've been accompanying the farmers, documenting these attacks, mobilizing Israelis. The last video that a lot of us saw of you was when you were facing down these, it seemed settlers in uniform who had a drone come, and the drone had actually hurt one of the activists who were there, and then they came to collect it. And as they came to collect it, were shooting live fire into the air. It was this very scary thing. These are unarmed, nonviolent activists. I want you to tell us about that incident, what you and your colleagues have been seeing, and how other Israeli activists and communities are showing up on the ground in this moment.
Thank you. And I would like to start with saying thank you for the people that do come to this webinar and do come to the field. And, we started with talking about hope. And I don't know if we are bringing a lot of hope right now, but I'm always a fan. I know that it's controversial of our anthem, and we are saying, Od lo avda tikvatenu, we didn't lost our hope. And this is really important because day after, and I will describe what happened, the day after we were in the field, and of course this week also, after what happened in this Shabbat, in this Saturday, which is, of course, crazy in Jewish terms. And we will make a very big effort this Friday to come in by hundreds to the place, to one of the places. Of course, it was this Saturday in Burin, in Tormusaya, in Beta, in other places. We will come to Burin, I think, with hundreds, and this is really important for us. And I want to say to the people, it's not only about the olive harvest. Of course, all along the year we are working with al-Khair, we are working with shepherds, we are planting and so on. So please do come and be part of our work. And I will say another thing about the thing that you said in the beginning. You mentioned that Ziv and I got connection to the Gaza envelope. And really, me and my family, we just came back 2 months ago to Kibbutz Nirim. It's near Khan Yunis, kilometer and a half from Khan Yunis. And I want to say that, of course, even before October 7th, I wrote so many times about the fact that our children is kind of the shield of the settlements. The reason that nobody care is not the word. They do care, but not about getting kind of a diplomatic solution or any solution, was that they need to pay in order to get a diplomatic solution. And the payment, of course, is in the West Bank. And October 7th, in so many ways, is because of that. And the way they built, and still in a lot of ways, where your president is talking about ceasefire, and also here, the most Israelis think we are in a ceasefire, but we are not in a ceasefire, really. And I really want all of you to be here in order to feel and hear and know that we are not in ceasefire in Gaza, and of course in the West Bank. So in the olive harvest, again, we are going outside to the field each day with a lot of partners. We work, of course, with Yesh Din and with the community of al-Khair and with a lot of other organizations. And really, I admire the activists and the organizations that are working, and of course, the New Israel Fund that supported it. But now in the olive harvest, it's most intensive time, of course. And of course, we knew that what's the atmosphere is, what's the reality is, and we got prepared ourselves and took more staff members and trying to think about procedures and so on. How can we protect ourselves and, of course, the volunteers and the farmers? But we failed, actually. This year is the worst. I'm leading this organization for 7 years, And this is the worst time ever that I know. And of course, you talked about the data that shows us that at least from 2006, it's the worst time, this October and now November. So we had 22 days. We wanted to add more, but it is hard. I must say that this term is also hard because there are not a lot of olives on trees because there wasn't any rain last winter. But we were 22 days. 3 days of them we got attacked brutally by groups of settlers, what we call Jewish terror. Actually, we are not focusing about settlers. We are focusing about Jewish terror because it's the reason, and that's a shame, of course, for us that their reason is like Jewish. Because like Eid and Ziv explained, they want to push away the people from their land. They want to annex it and so on, and they think that God is talking to them, and this is our land, and of course there is a Jewish supremacy and so on. So we are there not only as human rights activists and humanistic activists and so on, but also from our Jewish philosophy. So the week before, like last Tuesday, we were in an area near Dir Istia. It was in terms of settlements between Revava and Yakir. And we were there around 50 people, some of them rabbis from North America with Truah. And some of them are rabbis, and some of them are standing together activists and are volunteers and so on. So very nice group, and we walked for 2 or 3 hours. Around 11 a.m., this drone that you were talking about, came from Revava, from one of the settlements, and started like nudging us, like going on the on people's heads and so on. And we tried, of course, to proceed, and I gathered all the people to talk about Torah, about the portion of the week and those kind of ideas. And then the drone hit one of our rabbis. Thanks God, it wasn't so bad. She got very badly wounded in her arm, but of course it could be worse. And then after 10 minutes, when, of course, we assisted her and got ready to evacuate her from the field, there came like 2 people in uniform. Like Ziv said, those people are reserved military in the settlements themselves. We know that phenomena also from the Gaza envelope after October 7th. But in the case of the settlements, they are using this force in order to harm us in that case, and of course the farmers. And then they pointed on us their guns, and that was very, very frightened. Like I was 10 meters from them, and there are all those people that you need to guard. And of course, we don't have any weapons and so on. And then they shoot in the air and left the place. And after that, we talked with the mayor of Dir Istia and the farmers in the field, and they said a few things. One was, and that was from empathic place, but they said, now you know what we are suffering from 24/7. You are coming and going, and we must say, like, maybe people think we are so brave and so on, and it took some courage to be there, but we are coming from our very pleasant homes, and one way or another, and then coming back to our home, and of course they are facing this reality all over again. The second thing was that we couldn't get into the field, and that we are getting a lot. Farmers that are saying we didn't get into this field from October 7th because of this violence, because of those new outposts and new farms and so on. We consider the campaign to push away and take away Syria is really evident in the field. And the third thing was, do come again, please come again, although it was hard and so on. Please come again, we need you. And this is the most important things for us. I want to say another quick thing is that in a way, we must learn from the right wing. Like what we said and what Ziv mentioned about this government, it shows that they did a lot in working with their people, and also taking power. They don't have the majority in the government, but they are leading the ideology and so on. And we can learn from that, because now they have the campaign to cancel the harvest. It's crazy to cancel the harvest, meaning private lands of people. They depend on that economically. Of course, from October 7th, there are a lot of economic problems and unemployment and so on. So cancel the harvest. And when they are working very sharply, they gain those things that they want. And we can see that also in our camp, in our big camp, when we were very direct, like in the hostages example, or now the inquiry commission, only now in the last hours in the Knesset, there is a discussion about it. When we are very direct and very like we know exactly what we want to gain and get the support from the people, we can make change. And that is for us to understand. When we will be like that, again, in terms of a protective presence, but also in terms of push away the outpost and the farms, inshallah, in the next government and so on, we need to be very precise, very direct, and very bold in what we want to achieve. So thank you.
I add just that we need a vision. I think.
Say that again, Ziv.
I think this government is doing so well because they prepared and they had a plan and they have a vision.
Yeah, definitely.
And they're going for the vision. Something
it's a very dangerous one, but they have one, and this is really important for us to understand.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have more questions for you, of course. But I think I'm just going to ask one. I'm going to ask a final one at the end, and I'm going to go to the questions that are in the chat, because people have some kind of important, I think, but basic but important questions. So, one of the questions is kind of, how does this work? And I'm not sure which one of you wants to answer this, so you can decide amongst yourselves. But if the territories are under Israeli civil control, sort of as we described, more or less, and the Palestinians don't have civil rights, where does the Supreme Court come in? I think this is a question to you, Ziv. Like, what does that mean for Israeli jurisprudence? Does the Supreme Court then have jurisdiction more expansively than it has historically? How has the Supreme Court helped or not helped the rights of Palestinians to live where they live?
So I think there's a big gap between the image of the High Court in Israel, or what used to be the image of the High Court in Israel, and the reality, which is quite different. If you look at the history of rulings of the High Court, basically the High Court in Israel approved almost every method and every practice of the occupation, allowing what we see now to become. I think in the past, you could have relied more on courts, and we did for many years, Yesh Din, to get a specific remedy for a specific case to a specific family or individual, and this is sometimes still the case. So you can win very small, narrow battles, but you kind of lose the fight, because I think, and this question is also indicating that there is a lot of glory, and the court enjoys this halo of being just and of being open to Palestinians who are not citizens to come to the court and get the remedy. But basically, the courts in the 80s already refused to even judge whether the settlements are legal or not, and they wouldn't rule on anything that is slightly, I would say, about a policy now, and they address only individual cases. And even in the individual case where you try to build on that to get something, a ruling that would say something about the policy, it's very hard, and they are very cautious about that. So you hardly get something that has to do with policies. And it's gotten worse because the Supreme Court in Israel is much more weak than it used to be. And it also, it can be said that they're struggling for their lives in a way, with everything that is happening with the inner judicial overall in Israel. Also, there has been a lot of changes in the High Court, so you have more right-wing leaning judges than before. And I think the rest of them, or even all of them, are really intimidated by the pressure applied from the right wing in Israel.
Yeah, I think
I
that's
just want to add,
ahead.
this is maybe the time to say that this is not something that is out there in the West Bank, doesn't connect it, as I mentioned, to the war in Gaza, doesn't connect it to our war or struggle for democracy, doesn't connect it to what happened in the Arab society, Arab Israelis, Palestinians, what is going on with the crime and murder and so on. So all those dots are connected. Like we were on Tuesday there, and on Wednesday, Almo Cohen, which is the deputy minister in the Ministry of the Prime Minister, tried to it was with 30 people in our a conference in Beersheba of the Democrats, and of course shouting that you are traitors and so on. And on Thursday we have Alec Ifamov that just shouted to Ben Gvir that was there, like it's so regular that we convicted the criminal that supported terror and so on.
You're talking
And the
about
police
Ben Gvir.
took him for many hours and arrested him brutally and so on. So all those dots are connected, of course.
Of course.
Yeah.
I think it's even bigger. We view everything that is happening in Israel and the judicial overall as one of the main reasons it's happening is because the aspiration to annex the West Bank and apply sovereignty. And in order to do that, you need to weaken the Israeli democracy and checks and balances, basically.
Eid, have you seen, I mean, the Supreme Court is involved in some ways in your case in al-Khair, and you've seen these sort of, I think what Ziv is talking about, these pinpointed decisions that push things off, but, and even that are to your benefit, right? The Supreme Court has said the outpost that's in your backyard has to go, but the enforcement hasn't happened. And certainly not in the way that, looks like it's going to happen anytime soon. So, I think that also speaks to the weakness of the Supreme Court in this moment. And I'm curious, how you are feeling about that body. I know you've had some wins, so it's like a mixed bag. Do you want to comment on that, Eid?
Yeah, thank you. What we have in al-Khair, the same thing happened with this impunity, the government impunity with the army, the police. Even the decision by the Supreme Court, they're not effective on the ground if it's on settlers. And now we have 1 month since the decisions go out, and they don't affect it. They just came and they just abuse the Palestinian people who own the land and they live there. And this is the last thing we just hang on. It's the Supreme Court. But, every time I hear the news that they want to, so much as they want just to isolate them there, and Ben Gvir want to isolate him in this corner. And on the ground, they just weaken the Supreme Court all the time. And every time, if it's upon the things in the occupied territories, even in Israel, now they trying to weaken the Supreme Court, and that's not a good sign for Israeli democracy at all.
Yeah, I want to say finally, how we're getting some questions about this, and I want to end with this for each of you, give you each a moment to speak about this. What is helping? What is the work that we are doing that is helping? And then maybe this is the same and maybe it's different, but what gives you hope as we continue this struggle together? Eid, do you want to start?
Yeah, I mean, listen, the main important thing is our partnership as individual beliefs and individual ideas. That's mean Israelis and Palestinians, Jewish and Muslims, everybody in his beliefs. And what we do in this more than 15 years of struggle on the ground together with Israelis and Palestinian partnership, each give its work. Of course, we are the weak part in this power in front of the military power and all this decision by the government. But our work on the ground is the most important thing, and we need to keep this struggle. I have difficulties every day by settlers and a lot of people talking to me. You're wasting your time in this effort. I say this is the most important thing and the important way we do to work and struggle together in front of the brutality by the occupation. And we need to advocate for each other all the time. That's the way we can save, lives and efforts for both people in this country.
Thank you so much. That's you said what I feel as well. Ziv, I want to move to you, and then Avi we'll move on to you.
It's a good thing you save Avi for last because I'm not good with hope.
Sure you are.
I think I get a lot of hard questions professionally, but always when I'm asked about hope and what keeps us going, it's the hardest one to answer. I think it's kind of similar to what you said, and also Ed said that we have no other choice, right? So it's better to hold on to some hope and feel that you do something about it, even if you don't feel that necessarily it helps right now. I think for me, at least, the other option to give up or to kind of lean into despair is not really an option. So I'm just forced to be hopeful in a way and keep some kind of, even in the hardest days. And I agree with Avi. I think in every aspect we look at, these are the hardest days. I think we have some capacity of holding on to hope because otherwise it's a total despair.
It was hopeful, and if it's the hardest day, it's very hopeful because we know that it could be worse.
I think you and I know, never say that. Never say this is the darkest day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I'm just in the shelter, our home shelter where we were 30 hours during October 7th and 8th. So I will say our partners in the NIF, the people that came here, the people of Yesh Din and other organizations that are doing such a professional and kind of hard work, and of course the communities. And I must say that our Palestinian partners are so amazing. This is really amazing for me, what you said, Eid, and what we are hearing from our workers, the Palestinians, and I'm thinking about Samir from Awarta, or Khaled from Daesh, or Adam from Chizme originally, that they are in a way, they have a perspective. They are saying, we know that it will be better. We know that the solution will come, as Ziv said. And I know that. The question, of course, is the question of time and how much blood, unfortunately, will be spilled. But it will be. This is the only way. We need to find a way to live together from the river to the sea. So I really love the fact that we are not alone. Even if I was alone with my values, so I will be the crazy and I will be still in my crazy values. Okay, but we are not alone. So many people are with us. So many people are in the field. And actually, I said we wanted more than 22 days and we will have more. But till now, many hundreds of people, many hundreds of Israelis especially came in this very difficult and hard and frightening time. So this is really fill my heart and our hope in so many ways. And we have historic proportions, because we know as human beings and we know as Jews and as Palestinians that at the end things are changing, and we hope it will be for the best.
Yeah, I feel that same way, Avi. I mean, Ziv mentioned that we're in an election year and we don't know what the next government will look like, but it won't be this one. And that's already a positive. And politics has holds possibility inside of it to change on a dime. And one other thing you said, Avi, there is hope in partnership. And that has always been my experience as well. And I think that one of the questions that was raised, and I'm sorry to everybody who brought so many thoughtful questions to the chat that we're not able to answer, but one of the questions was about, how Israelis either change their attitude or see more of what's happening or understand more. And I think that a lot of the work that both of you are doing, and Eid for sure as a host, you are not only showing them like on TV, which I think is important, right? Avi, you were just on TV. People, you go on TV, but that's not what changes people's minds. What changes people's minds, and I know this from personal experience, because when I was 18 and living in a settlement, I went to al-Khair, and here I am now working for the New Israel Fund. Like that is the thing. Bringing people there is what helps change minds, because they see and they feel the things that you guys see and feel all the time. And even if they go back home, and I know all of us at home are sitting and thinking, well, what can we do? Well, you can go. There is, NIF has study tours. Rabbis for Human Rights is always willing, and I know I'm speaking for you, Eid, but I know that you're also willing to host people. You can go and you can contribute to what we do. And the New Israel Fund has this program now of protective presence support. So we support people who are on the ground with the things that they need, whether it's legal or psychological or just like getting gas money. Like we help them get there. And so this is something that you can support us in supporting them, and that itself is not a small thing. And so I want to thank everybody again for joining us, especially our panelists. You guys are an inspiration, truly, and it's such a pleasure to spend this hour with you. And Eid, best of luck. We're with you. We stand with you. Ziv and Avi, keep doing your work. We support you, and I hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their evening in Israel and afternoon in the US and in Germany and the Netherlands and wherever else you are on this call. Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.